everybody. Welcome to the Easy Coach. I'm Ethan Evans, the Easy Coach, and tonight we're going to talk about influence. And the first thing I always do is a sound check. So if my loyal folks in chat, I see someone already saying I'm a little quiet, we can crank that up as much as it'll go, and I'll lean into the mic. We have some new mic technology coming for next week. So hopefully you can hear me, but if not, we'll get through tonight. And I'll have a better mic setup as of next week. So thanks for the feedback. Uh-oh, multiple people saying it. We've had mic problems before. We'll see what we can do about that right now, moving the mic front and center in front of me. All right, so tonight's show's on influence, some things we always cover right away. Number one, we have some guests, usually from the Nash Nation. We'll welcome them later as the show fills up. I wanted to say a couple things about the community we're building here before I go into the topic of increasing your influence and how to be more influential. So the community we're shooting for here is a mix of people who are new in their career and those who are a lot more experienced. And so the best way to blend those two communities is for us to be participative and to help each other. Because I purposely have some people in the community who have come from Twitch and are newer in their careers, and some people who've come from my professional LinkedIn network and may have 10 or 20 years of career experience. And so I try to speak to both groups at once, and that sometimes requires that the people earlier in their career realize that there's value in seeing the people further along in their career as examples of where you can go. And a story I share about that is I had no idea where I'd end up. When I went to school, I wanted to build Apple computers. So Apple computers were new when I was a kid, and I wrote Apple a letter, actually. Yeah, the old paper kind. And said, hey, where do I have to go to school in order to build Apple computers? And I got an answer, and I went to school, and I never ended up working for Apple. But my plan was to be a hardware engineer. So you never know where you'll end up, and seeing some people in their career is great. So that's the type of community we want that has both examples, and those people can benefit from my experience, and people early in their career that can get a lot of the basics. Tonight, the topic of being influential is a little bit more in depth than some of our other topics have been. And so to be influential really is a whole bunch of things at once. And you need to master them all over time, but influence is one of the strongest career skills, and it applies to basically everyone. So tonight what we're going to do is give an overview of being influential and talk about where we should go deeper. And all right, Bunny Rabbit Bomb, hopefully you will get some knowledge tonight. So a few disclaimers up front. The way the show works is we run on a Q&A basis. I usually tell a couple of illustrative anecdotes from my history and let the Q&A widget fill up. And so what we do is when the QA widget fills up, then I start answering those questions. But you can vote on those items that other people put in. You log into Twitch, enter your questions, and you can either upvote other people's questions or you can enter your own. And the moderators will approve them, and I'll answer them as they come through. So with that in mind, welcome Hephaestus. I see you're in from Devin's channel. It's nice to have some of the Nash Nation here. And I see my helpful mods have put in the usual disclaimer that when I'm streaming, I speak for myself. I don't talk about things internal to Twitch or Amazon, and I don't answer questions about Twitch or Amazon internals. I'm just here talking about different ways you can build and grow your career, which is a lot of what I do when I work at Amazon. And that reminds me, a fun topic we'll have next on Monday, July 2nd, before the 4th of July holiday, or maybe that's a Tuesday, I guess. We'll talk about difficult coworkers, and that's something that can be a lot of fun. Everybody likes to talk about how to deal with someone who's difficult, and we'll have some coworker horror stories, I'm sure, and that'll be a good, fun topic to discuss. Then we'll take a long break because just announced today was Amazon Prime Day. And part of what I do, I think you all know, is I run Twitch Prime. We have a big role to play in Amazon Prime Day coming up in the middle of July. Look for more about that in public. But meanwhile, I will be out for a while, busy from July 2nd until mid-July. And then we'll resume the Easy Coach when we can. So without further ado, let's talk about influence. And I have my notes here. I'll be working off those. So being influential is a huge topic. And as I prepared for tonight's show, I realized I can't possibly talk about all aspects of influence. I listed 12 different ones in preparation for this show. And Hephaestus, you're welcome for the Decisive book. I hope the rap process really helps you out. Let's see. What to do with a big business deal. Nice. Well, that should be a fun story. Maybe we can talk about it sometime. So what I want to do is run through a list of areas, pieces of being influential, and have you folks tell me which ones you want to talk about and which ones you'd like to see me do full shows on in the future. So just listing a few really quickly. There's how to influence without authority. Everyone thinks that it's easy to be the boss and you just tell people what to do and they do it. But if you think about your own bosses and managers, you don't actually do that yourself. In other words, they tell you what to do and you decide whether you're going to do it or whether you're going to try and blow it off or delay it or convince them otherwise. So even with positional authority, you don't have perfect influence. And I would say you want to be influential, but you have to realize that position doesn't get you everything. And so the more you can be influential without resorting to because I'm the boss or because mommy said so, the better off you are. We'll talk about manipulation, or we could, right? Niccolo Machiavelli wrote the classic book on manipulation hundreds of years ago in Italy. We can talk about communication skills. We can talk about persuasion, which is different than manipulation. We can talk about negotiation, how to ask good questions, building relationships, using data, using demos, videos, presentations, PowerPoint, different ways to use essentially facts to be influential. You can talk about dress, appearance, voice, eye contact. All of those are ways to be influential. And I need to, all of those could be a whole show on their own. We can also talk about making requests. How do you ask for things? And that's one way to be influential. And you can even talk about sales. Selling is an influence profession. So that's 12 different areas. There's actually probably more things that, there are more topics than just those that fit within influence. But that's why I say no one show is going to cover everything about being influential. So I need you to think about which of those you'd most like to hear more about. So with that in mind, let me tell you a story. So when I joined Twitch, I didn't join in any authoritative position. 4 years ago, now almost 5 years ago, Amazon acquired Twitch. And a classic process that all big companies use is they assign an executive to help the new company come into the big company. And so that was me in this case. I asked, can I go work with Twitch? And I got assigned to the role of essentially being what we call the liaison. But the person who's the ambassador from the Amazon leadership style and team and company to the Twitch leadership team. And I met the leaders of Twitch, and I talked to them, and we got along, and I took on that role. But the important thing to understand is I had no authority. So the CEO at Twitch, Emmett Shear, and his team, they didn't report to me. I didn't report to them. So they also had no authority over me. But the idea was to work together and to get value, to make their job easier, and for me to help them be as valuable as possible to Amazon, who had paid $970 million in stock to acquire Twitch 5 years ago. So in something like that, I had to apply all of these different skills. I had to build relationships. I had to earn trust. I had to learn more about Twitch. I had to understand streamers. I had to understand the communities on Twitch. And in doing that, where that led was over time, when Twitch ran into problems and didn't have enough leaders to run all of its businesses, they agreed that I should take over some of them. So that was the outcome of that influence process. And that's how I ended up running the subscription business. So all the ways you can sub to creators, the bits business, all the ways you can cheer and chat. And I ended up also then leading the developer team, which created extensions and so on. So those are some of the things that came out of being influential. So with that in mind, that's the value of influence, because I went from purely advising the leadership team to being a part of the leadership team. So it will be a very short show if people don't have questions about what they'd like me to talk about in influence. So to enter those, the mods will put up the link again, but you'll need to go ask a question in our extension, and I'll talk about those. No, you shouldn't post in chat. The instructions are right there. You can either use the extension or you can go to the web page, and the web page works great on mobile, and you can put them in, or you can put them in chat if you have to, if for some reason you can't do something else, and the mods will move them. So with that in mind, let me share a few of my favorite books, and that may give you a prompt. Negotiation. One of the famous books on negotiation is called Getting to Yes. Someone says, my wisdom is a blessing. That's fantastic. Well, you are blessed. But the negotiation book, Getting to Yes, is about basically how to make negotiation win-win. And they talk about win-win or walk away. And the idea is if you can't get to a deal that's good for both of you, you probably shouldn't do a deal at all. And the thing you'll find with a lot of books I talk about is they're short, because I don't have a lot of time to read, and I know a lot of you are busy or have short attention spans. And so I would say I'll try to recommend short books. There are some huge books I don't like, I don't get through them very often, so I don't recommend them. Asking questions. So a book I'm completing right now is on influencing purely through asking questions. So it's the reverse of telling people. It's do everything by asking. And I know some of the Nash Nation is here. He's a big fan of the ancient Greek philosophers, the ancient Roman writers, Seneca. Well, there's something called the Socratic method, which is leading everyone to ideas through asking them leading questions and bringing them there. This topic would be even more about just asking honest questions, not trying to lead people anywhere, just being honestly curious. And I'm reading this book because I suck at it. I am much better at what the book calls do and tell. I do things and I tell people stuff. And I annoy some people with that because one of the things that happens is I tell them things they already know. And that's why I keep asking you guys, and thank you for all the people who are now putting questions in. That's super helpful. I try to go question driven because I can't read your minds and know what you want to know about influence, but I can answer the most popular audience questions and address those. So that works way better because then I'm talking to the topics you want to hear about. So if you don't have a question, but you see questions coming in, you can always upvote them or downvote them. Well, you can only upvote them. So I guess not saying anything is downvoting. But you can upvote them, and I'll answer the one you're most interested in first. So a few more books, and then I see there is a question on a book. We may get to that and talk about it. Probably one of the most important parts of being influential is having a personal relationship. And the way I explain this is really simple. If someone you don't know asks you to do something, maybe you do it, maybe you don't. If someone you know and don't like asks you to do something, you're probably even less likely to do it. Just think about it. Even if it's a very reasonable request, like, could you get me a glass of water? If you really don't like the person, you're like, get it yourself. If you contrast that to someone you've built a relationship with who's a friend of yours, you're probably very willing to go get them a glass of water. You're probably a lot more willing to do a lot of harder things. So if they ask you, hey, can you come over to my house and help me move on Saturday? So spend all day sweating and loading boxes, and I'm going to pay you in pizza. If it's a friend of yours and you've built a relationship, you're pretty likely to consider canceling your plans to help them move. Whereas someone you don't like, you wouldn't even give a glass of water. So that's where relationship really matters. And the strongest book I recommend on this is a little bit deep. It's called Leadership and Self-Deception. And what leadership and self-deception teaches in quick essence is people are really good at detecting when you're not being honest with them or when you're treating them as an object. And you treat someone as an object when you're just trying to manipulate them into doing what you want and you don't actually care about them as a person. No matter what words you use, no matter how well you explain what you want, oh, I really need this glass of water. I'm thirsty and the water is free. I just can't get to the sink or the water fountain right now. Could you go do it? If they feel like you're just telling them, hey, fetch, they're not going to do it. And so people are really good at that, at detecting that. And the point of leadership and self-deception is we convince ourselves that we're justified in being difficult and being hard to, that we're justified and we're treating them fairly, when in fact it's our own issues that are causing us to interact poorly. The whole point of the book is we cause a lot of our own problems by the way we treat others. So just think about it. It's my number one book recommendation after Decisive, which some of the people in the Nash Nation have read. So let's see. We'll jump into questions now because we have a bunch. But bottom line on influence is this. We can't force people to do things. Not in the modern world. They've got to want to do it. Even in the very ancient world, the only thing people were able to compel is physical labor. If you think of how the pyramids got built with slave labor. Yes, you can force people, if you threaten their lives, to pull big rocks around, but you can't force them to think. They've got to want to. So the first question up here was just a placeholder. It was, what topics within influence should we do full shows on? Feel free to suggest a topic you'd like to see a full show on and put that in. But I'm going to knock that question off the list. And then we're going to jump to and answer this first one, which is what sort of ways could one influence their way into an interview? Well, we do a lot of stuff about interviewing, and we're going to do a show coming up in a couple weeks about how to conduct an effective job search. If you want to get, there is a top 10 list in chat. There's a question that's just straight on this. Is there a top 10 list of books you recommend anywhere? Yes, on my website. So that's www.theeasycoach.com. And right at the top, you should see a tab that says books. And it's got all of my usual book recommendations, including this one, which is if you want to influence your way into an interview, try the book, What Color is Your Parachute? It's probably the canonical reference on job hunting, and it would include advice on how to get an interview. But to influence your way into an interview, there's two things you can do. If you're talking to the decision maker, you can use all the tools of influence in order to get them to want to hire you. More likely, you're using a network and you're influencing people in your network. And if they're in your network, you already have a relationship with them, which is part of what you're doing, part of building influence. You use that relationship and you ask them for help to get you an interview. So we did a lot of work last week. We did resume review and we did how to interview well. And we talked endlessly about using your network. I see Kari Safari says, usually I'm going to tech meetups. That's another good way. That's building a network and getting to know people. It's also putting you in the right place. We also have our guest, the Rex 243, checking in from Hamburg, Germany. He says he's 22 minutes late because he forgot his alarm. Or maybe slept through it. But I admire anybody who gets on. I love the fact he gets on to watch the show. It's, I think, probably 3 a.m. in Germany now, because last time it was 5 a.m. and we did a show later at night. So the way I would influence my way into an interview is all the skills that are on the list here. Good communication, asking questions. What can I do for you? What do you need? What sort of projects keep you awake at night? You get a hiring manager or someone that you want a job from talking about what they need, and then you show them how you can help with that. Another book I've been talking about recently goes into making requests. And there's a short book, I've just finished it, called Rejection Proof. And Rejection Proof is the journey of this guy who got turned down for a job. He was trying to get his company funded. He didn't get turned down for a job. He got turned down for funding. And it absolutely crushed him. And it's very similar to job hunting. He talks about getting his wife a job at Google, and how he went about helping her do that. And he and she were successful. I see some of our folks have looked into the rejection guy. Yeah, Rejection Proof, Jia Jiang. So with Rejection Proof, what this guy did is after he got turned down, he spent 100 days trying to get himself rejected by people by making crazy requests to see if he could toughen himself up and figure out how to deal with rejection. So one of his requests was at the end, his 100th day of rejection, he decided he would work to get his wife a job at Google, which she had told him that was her dream job. And it took them a long time. It took more than a day, and it took her 4 interviews, but she did eventually get a job at Google, and they moved to the Bay Area, where he's now an entrepreneur, and at least when he wrote the book, she worked at Google. So that's another way you can learn some. The point is, keep asking for the interview. All right, we'll jump to the next question. I'll let the mods roll it over. I jumped ahead of them and took control last time. And the next question is, what do you think of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, specifically on inspiration versus manipulation? So if you don't know the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek, it's one of those books where the main idea is right in the title. His point is, we generally start with telling people what to do or even how to do it. And so we start at a very low level and we say, pick up that bucket and carry it over there. You need to be carrying buckets. And so that's pretty insulting and not very inspiring. And more to the point, when I walk away, let's say there's some problem with carrying the bucket. Now people have no idea why they're carrying the bucket. And so they just stop. But if you tell them, look, we have a flood in the basement and I need you to carry buckets of water outside and dump them so we can empty the basement, now there's a why. And maybe they can figure out a better way to unflood the basement. Or maybe they can figure out, oh, hey, I found this hose that's running water into the basement. Maybe I should stop carrying buckets and turn that off. So going to the specific, and that's obviously a trivial example. At a much bigger example, we're always doing things within Twitch and Amazon, big projects. We don't always explain them as well as we could. So, for example, when we worked to build Twitch Prime and to roll it out, there was a question, why do we need a piece of Prime that's dedicated to gamers? And I had to do, we and my team and the leaders around me, we had to do a lot to explain why were we expanding Prime. And like, why do we call it Twitch Prime? Because nothing else is named like that. If you think about it, it's Amazon Prime, it's Amazon Prime Video, Prime Music. We don't have, the logical equivalent name would have been Prime Gaming. But we didn't use that. So why? Answering the question exactly as it's asked. Oops, I didn't make the question come up. That's my bad. So we'll fix that real quick. Now it's gone. Nope, there we go. Okay. Anyway, the question was influence versus manipulation. The things were lagging and somehow I killed the question. Simon Sinek, look, I don't like manipulation. And it's because people eventually figure out they've been manipulated and then they're really mad. And I want to take a second. Awesome Dave, who's our producer, got his new job this week at Sweet Greens. And he just subbed back to the channel, which means he's getting a chance to be on and listen. The show is based in Seattle. He's down in LA where the Sweet Greens headquarters are, starting his new job, and I'm really happy for him. So I like influence rather than manipulation. Someone says you're right about authenticity. It's completely important to be genuine. And if people figure out you're manipulating them, they'll basically hate you. Like there's obviously an old saying everybody knows, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, shame on me. So if I'm getting fooled and taken advantage of, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go another direction. And I'm going to do anything I can to get away from you, to not do the work, to be suspicious of what you say. It becomes a little bit the boy who cried wolf. If you manipulate me once, now I'm suspicious of you forever. So I am a big proponent of honesty. And I will say this can be tough in business. Sometimes I have confidential information and people ask me something that I can't answer. And so I have to tell them like, oh, I don't know, when I actually do know, and that can undermine trust. But that's very rare, and I try very hard to avoid those situations. That said, and this is not example, but like I'll be asked, oh, are we thinking about buying company X? Well, we might be or we might not be, but I can't answer that question. So if let's say we were thinking about buying someone we never would, like Carnival Cruise Lines, because Twitch Prime and gaming has nothing to do with that. But if someone asked me, are you thinking about buying Carnival Cruise Lines? I'm just always going to say no. It doesn't matter if we were or not. I have to. But I avoid that as much as I can. And certainly if I'm asking someone to do work, I never manipulate them. So that's a long-winded answer. I start with why. And I encourage you, if you're working somewhere and you just get told to do something, ask why. That actually is a big part of this book on rejection we were just talking about, rejection proof. He learned very quickly that if he asked people why they were rejecting him, often they would change their answer or they would give him a reason he could work around. So he tells a story, for example, where one of the things he tried to do was he thought, I will get rejected. He went and bought a big potted plant, a rose, and he went up to a random guy's door. He lived in Austin, Texas. Um, and he knocked on the door and said, can I plant this rose in your yard? And the guy who answered it said, no, I don't think so. And so in the past, he would have just said, oh, okay, and moved on because his goal was to learn to deal with rejection and learn to deal with the discomfort. But he wanted to get better at it. So he said, well, why? Why can't I plant the rose in your yard? And the guy said to him, well, I have a dog and my dog digs up flowers, so it won't stay there and I'll have a mess in my yard. But then he went on to say, my neighbor across the street loves flowers. Why don't you go ask her? She'll probably want it. And so the guy learned two things from this, the author of the book. The first thing he learned was that he wasn't being rejected because of anything about him. It wasn't personal or even what he was offering. It just didn't fit the guy's need. The second thing is the person across the street did want the flower. And so the first guy had recommended a solution that worked out, and he gave many examples of this. The point is, by explaining why you have smart employees, they will work around your problem. Awesome Dave, some of you have heard this before, was in the military, and he and I have shared a joke many times. There's this story about, it's a joke about, oh, you need to get a flagpole raised, and you're an Army lieutenant, and you have a sergeant, a flagpole, 2 shovels, 2 buckets. There are 2 privates. You have a sergeant and 2 privates. And how do you get the flagpole raised? And the correct answer in the joke is you say, Sergeant, raise the flagpole. Now that doesn't tell why, but the point is you talk about what you want as an outcome, not how to do it. Like, oh, you pick up a shovel and you pick up a shovel and you dig a hole and you go get some water in the bucket. You don't do it that way. All right, I think we've beaten that question to death. And if you want to buy Carnival Cruise stock, good luck with that. Mods, let's roll on to the next question. What is the best way to influence the direction, focus of a startup as an engineer without stepping on the toes of the executives? So we ran through all the different influence tools, but if you are an engineer, one of the best ways to influence the direction of a startup is with a demo. In other words, if it's anything you can build, you can argue for a feature or you can show it. And by the way, if you show it working, you remove all the argument about can it be built. And so I think you can avoid stepping on the toes by avoiding getting in an argument. You notice all through this talk on influence, I've never mentioned winning arguments or debating. And that's because once you start arguing with people, they become emotionally invested in their position. You're decreasing your amount of relationship with them, and the odds you're going to influence them go way down. And so what I would say is, in a case where you want to influence within a startup, one of the best ways to do it is to be able to demo. There are other ways. Any of the other tools we talked about here, asking questions, using data, those are all good, but specific to an engineer in a startup, I just prove it. Give them something they can look at, give them something that shows what you're saying if you can. So that would be my answer. Keep filling up the queue with questions. We've got a good show going, and we've got some more good ones here. We'll go to the question, how do you influence your way into moving into more of a strategy and decision making role versus being the person who's asked to execute? Um, we didn't talk about this, but one is have ideas. So if you never put an idea forth, most people won't think of you as someone who has ideas. I've told this story before, but run through this thought exercise in your head. If I tell you a joke, what do you normally think? What most people think if they're told a joke is, oh, that was a funny joke, or they think it's a bad joke. Doesn't matter. They think, oh, funny joke. But if every time you see me, I tell you a funny joke, actually something happens in your brain, which is you start thinking, I'm a funny guy. And that totally changes how you now perceive me. And so the same thing is true about strategy versus execution. If when you interact with people, you're calmly asking interesting questions and providing interesting ideas, then you'll be asked and thought of as a strategic person. So this takes some homework. You can, maybe you're so smart that you can ask good questions and provide good ideas without doing any work ahead of time. But most people can't do that. And so I would say you need to think about the problem and you need to be cognizant of what's the challenges of your business are, or the challenges of whatever it is, wherever it is you work. You need to have that information and come up with good questions to ask and good suggestions to make. And then what you do is when you run into people, even if they say, look, I need you to go do this thing. So they're running you around to go do stuff. That's okay. When they ask you to do stuff, take just a minute and say, hey, can I ask you a question? Can I make a suggestion? Or could you tell me about an idea I have? And if they say, no, I need you to do this right now, say, great, could I ask you later? Now, you don't want to be a complete nag, but you do want to always be contributing. And basically, that's how you influence your way into more strategy and decision making, is you show that you have interesting ideas. So I have some people who are several layers below me in the organization that I go to for advice and input. A few of you on this channel know Bobby Scar, who works at Twitch. I consult Scar all the time about Twitch Prime products because I've learned he really understands the community. But he no longer even works in my organization. So he's very influential, and more so maybe than some people that are closer in the organization to me. And that's because he has good ideas. And there are a number of people I go to across my business, regardless of level, because they've shown they consistently have good ideas. So we have a few more good questions in here. I encourage the audience to keep voting on them so I know which way to answer them, which order to answer them in, because they all have one vote now. So we'll start going through them, but if you don't vote, you get to listen to what other people want to talk about. All right. Next question is, how do you build a relationship with people in general? How do you come across as likable and trustable so that you can climb up the ranks? Well, the easiest answer there is to be trustworthy. So trying to snow people that you're trustworthy when you're not, probably a bad idea. And also probably a bad idea not to be trustworthy. Similarly, if you want to be viewed as likable, don't be a dick. Be reasonably nice. So try to manage your temper, try to be friendly. Those are obvious, but the point is, if you want to be seen as something, be that something. Gandhi is famous for saying, be the change you want to see in the world. So, for example, I'd like to see more people doing shows like I'm doing, helping other people grow in their careers, so I'm trying to exemplify that. So be the change you want to be. Now, specific advice, The classic advice here, if you want to work on this, is the time tested book from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's probably at least 100 years old. But that's like um, the classic book on this. And it says simple things like get people's names right and call them by their names. Now, Carnegie leans a little bit too much for me into manipulation. He talks about things that really aren't sincere, and I don't agree with all of that. But it's about what I said earlier, building relationships. Another great way to build a relationship with people is to interface with them outside of work. So, invite them out for a drink, invite them to lunch, invite them to coffee, invite them to dinner. If they have an activity, right, join them on the company softball team or whatever the hell it is. Meet them in the parking lot for a smoke. Whatever it is you do, get them outside of the work environment. In the work environment, people are focused on this model I talked about earlier of do and tell. Do what I want you to. I'm going to tell you what I need you to do. They're not in the mode of treat you like a human. Make them see you as a human. Help them see you as a human. Build a relationship where they know more about you. Part of this can also be sharing something about yourself. So, yes, smoking is bad, kids. I'm not a big fan of smoking, but I have seen a lot of people bond over a cigarette in the parking lot. And so it's reality that if you're a smoker, at least get that value out of it. Um, so, to this point, though, if you want to build a relationship, spend time with people and then share something about yourself. There's this great app you can find. Actually, it's fun research. I'm excited to talk about this. So there's this app called 36 Questions. And before it was an app, it was a research project. And this professor figured out that you could take two complete strangers and over the course of like an hour, by having them and alternate answering these 36 questions to each other, they would become much more tightly bonded with each other. And the first question was completely innocuous. And I'm going to have everybody answer this one in chat. It'll be fun to see people's answers. So if you're logged into chat, get ready because here you go. The first question was, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, living or dead, who would you pick? So if you could go back in time and have dinner with someone who's dead, or if you could have dinner with someone who's alive now, who would you want? Steve Irwin, Steve Jobs. These are interesting answers. My own answer is Jesus Christ. I think that would be incredible. There is Ethan Evans. Wow, there's thank you, Hakase. That's definitely the nicest answer I'm going to get tonight. So yeah, God. So it would be but the point was they had people answer this, and pretty much no one is, the Rex 243, he's going for a triumvirate here. It's interesting. Two business leaders and one Messiah. And thank you all for chiming in and answering this. It's fun. It's fun to have chat involved and putting some stuff in. Dark Red 00, you're going to have to tell me who Clarence Avant is. I'll admit my ignorance. Bob Ross would be fun. I think having dinner with Bob Ross would be fantastic. I'd certainly love to get a painting from him or a painting lesson in person. Keanu Reeves. Oh, that's interesting. Gandhi. That would be chill for sure. Yeah, Gandhi's a fascinating and controversial figure. So Leonardo da Vinci, these are awesome. Keep them coming. Neil Stevenson from our longtime subscriber Akbla. That's interesting. I'll have Steve. Akbla is Steve, and I would love to hear from Steve sometime. Tell us more, Steve. Why, of all the people in the world, Neil Stevenson? Julius Caesar. I'm going to need education again here. Who is Dara Khosrowshahi? So I don't know that person. But the point is, none of you have any problem, CEO of Uber. Got it. None of you have any problem answering this question, and you're not offended by it. But here's what's really interesting. Even by just answering this and seeing everybody scroll by and chat, you actually probably feel that you know more about the people in chat and they're more real and more two-dimensional to you, more three-dimensional to you than they were 5 minutes ago. And it's one dumb question. Now, eventually, those 36 questions are set up to slowly get more and more intimate. And no, not intimate in that way. I'm sure Chad will love that. But to get more personal and deeper. And what happens is it's encouraging people to share a little bit about themselves over time. And as they share more, basically they learn to trust each other more. And so, yeah, so the Rex 243, see, it is true. It's amazing. If you do all 36, and somebody can go pull some of the other questions if you want, because quick Google will show them up and paste a couple of them in here. But the questions at the end get really much more personal. And so one of them is like, what are 3 things you can tell or think you can tell about someone by looking at them? And, the other person you're talking to. So, you guys in chat can decide what are 3 things you think you can tell about me by looking at me here the way I am. And then I can't see you, but if I said that about you, and it goes through all these layers, here's the punchline. At the end of this hour of answering questions, they surveyed the 2 people at the table and they asked them, how close do you feel? How close is your relationship to this person you just answered questions with? And what they did is they had them rated on some scale. And then they'd ask them about other people in their lives, like their parents and their significant others. And the bottom line is, about 1/3 of the people ended up rating the relationship with the person they had just talked to for an hour that they had never met before, had nothing they knew in common with, higher than their significant other, as one of the most significant relationships in their life. And that was in an hour. And so there's a very long answer, but it's a really neat piece of science. And we had a fun experiment in chat of how do you build a relationship with people in general? You share personal things about yourself in an appropriate way, and you ask questions. So, all right, we're ready to move on. So the next question is, you talk very highly of LinkedIn as your hiring portal with Devin Nash. How does one get into your ecosystem? On LinkedIn, you start building a network. Like step 1, get an account. I'm not sure where you're starting from, but everyone's interested in this. How do you get into the ecosystem? Many people on LinkedIn accept almost any request they get of someone who wants to connect with them, unless it seems like spammy or you're selling things, in which case they may not connect with you, or they may disconnect or block you later. And so what I guess I would say is, on LinkedIn, start connecting to people with shared interests, start following famous people that talk about topics you're interested in, but start building a network. And you'll find, if you're at all in any kind of professional world, the way people start building a network is by through their company. They start connecting to other people they know. Can you move the question to the left on top of the blue shade? Yeah, we might. It's not going to be easy to switch them right now while we're live, but I can switch them next time so they're easy to read. So thank you for the feedback. Um, and I'll see about switching them up for next broadcast. I do see they're hard to read. Let me see if I can do that live. I should be able to. We may have to take the question widget away. Reposition component one. Here we go. Let's try that. Stand by. Nope. Fail. I'll have to get Awesome Dave to do that another time. I'm going to move it back where it was because what I managed to do is move the question list, not the actual questions. So we can do that, but not right now. Okay, here we go. So anyway, going back to the actual question, you want to get in somebody's ecosystem in LinkedIn, you connect to them through someone else. So LinkedIn has the ability to do this. You build a network and it will actually tell you, oh, you know Ethan, or you know whoever, you know Steve Day through Ethan, because I think I'm connected to Akbla, that's Steve Day. And if you wanted to meet him and you were already connected to me, who is Awesome Dave? He's famous, that's true. Awesome Dave is our producer. So, and he's in chat right now. But if you wanted to meet one of them and you're connected to me, you reach out to me and say, hey, Ethan, and LinkedIn tells you how to do this and facilitates it. I'd really like to meet Awesome Dave because whatever, I want to hire a producer. I have a suggestion for his. So we're going to take care of something here. Give me a second. All right. So, there's Shadow Fox. Excellent. Coming in from her stream. So, one of our mods, she arrived just seconds too late for me to issue a ban. But, that's okay. It's good you were busy streaming. You have a living to earn. So, we're in the middle of talking about influencing, and now we're talking about building your LinkedIn network and how to do it. Basically, you build a network of the people you know, and you reach out through them to other people you're interested in, and you get introductions. And generally, you need to have a way, you need to have something in common. So you need to offer or talk about something in common with what you do, or why you're interested in connecting to them. Because most people aren't going to bother to connect to you if you don't have anything in common with them. And so I would say, if you want to reach out to someone, don't just send them a cold call. Tell them something interesting about why you're interested in them, why you want to connect to them, what you would like to offer them, or what you think you have in common, or what you do that's shared. So it can be people from your school if you went to college, people from your job I already mentioned, people who play the same sports. All of network building is about commonality and finding that commonality, finding a shared interest. The best business development people and sales people are really good at it, which is why they always start with small talk. Business dev people and sales people don't do small talk because they have nothing better to do. They do it because they're trying to create a bond. It's why so many people talk about university sports, and sports are such a common topic. All right. Let's go ahead and move on. There's a big question here. Are there any specific ways you would recommend to gain more influence and move up the career ladder in a company in a junior position? If this was already answered in the beginning, please ignore. So I do think we talked some about this, and I think you'd find the answer here. Somebody asked, how do you become more influential? How do you get more involved in strategy and decision making? And I did a long answer to that. So I'm going to point you back to that and go ahead and move on. So yeah, I see it's the Rex 243. So I did answer that, Rex. Go ahead and jump back when you get a chance, and it's in the VOD. So we'll go on. How do you gain influence with an aggressive or pushy manager? Or is it not worth the effort? So we'll do a show sometime on how to deal with bad bosses. The show next week can cross over into that. We're going to do a show on difficult coworkers, and bad bosses is like a special case of difficult coworker. So, how do you gain influence with a pushy manager? First, you have to stand up to your own respect, right? Managers, don't let managers tell you to do something unethical unless you're going to starve to death, quit. But with a pushy or aggressive manager, remain calm and ask them questions. People can be pushy or aggressive, but you ask them a question rather than fighting with them. You gain influence also by being seen as useful to them. So if you have a pushy or aggressive manager who comes to you and says, I need you to go wash my car, which is not a reasonable request, but we'll use it as an example. I need you to go make copies of this document. You can say, okay, I'll do that. I'll get right on that. But when you bring it back, you say, hey, can I ask you a question? Why was this important? Although that could be confrontational. But like, what are your biggest problems that you're working on? Basically, the best way to ingratiate yourself to a manager is to help them with their problems. And so you ask, what else can I help you with? So even if they order you around, you say, what else can I help you with? And yes, they may start seeing you as like just a gopher who will run around for them, but